So, the most extensive search for a general manager in head coach history presses forward as the New York Jets interview one candidate after another. And the Senior Bowl is going to be here before you know it. So, we're going to talk about some prospects. We're going to talk about Jets head coach and GM candidates and anything else that comes up tonight on Jet Nation Live. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio. Be sure to log on to jetnation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Joined tonight by my co-host Dylan Terman. How we doing, Dylan?
I'm doing good. That longest search in NFL history seems about on
list.
par.
I should have said the longest list.
The fact that you're interviewing or potentially going to interview upwards of 27 guys right now, according to my list of all the requested as well as completed interviews, 12 from the general manager side and 15 from the head coaching side. Yeah, this is a pretty lengthy search, and we can get into the legitimacy of some of them or the strength of some of these candidates, but so far, I can't really complain too much from either side.
You know, I did hear a theory and this is why people need to be on the forums at Jet Nation. I saw a theory on there today that I thought, man, I hope that's not true, but I could see that being true. This is a fairly new venture for Mike Tannenbaum and his 33rd team and what they want their role to be. Is Tannenbaum saying, I'm going to build as many connections with this search as I can and network, and let's bring a 1,000 guys in here so I can sit across from them face to face, look them in the eye, and get to know them and build a rapport and a friendship, maybe with some people in the league who I don't know that well. Because I'm torn, Dylan. I've seen some people ask it, and it's weird. And I said exact thing I said the other day on the forums at Jet Nation. I said it's really strange, isn't it? On the one hand, I'm like, hey, be thorough and comprehensive and bring in as many qualified people as you can. And then I see by day 2, there's like 50 requests. And I'm like, do you even know what you're looking for? Like, you should sit down, right? And say like, okay, what do you want in a head coach? We want this. Okay, well, let's narrow that down and let's get you down to like a dozen candidates. But like 20 on day 2, that's kind of nuts. There's nothing this organization has done historically that should make you say, oh yeah, they're going to get this right. And this, so I guess if they'd hired some good coaches in the past, you'd be like, all right, well, this is their process, so we'll sit here and wait. But the process seems to change every time, and they get it wrong every time. So no benefit of the doubt from me anyway. But does it worry you, the length of the list and how quickly we're seeing 20 plus names for the position?
I'm not sure if worry is the word that comes to mind, but I definitely do want to understand more exactly what they're targeting, and maybe they just certainly have no clue what they're targeting, and that's why we've seen such a scatter plot of different backgrounds. And at first I was looking at it like a positive. I'm not necessarily looking at it as a negative, but I do start to wonder, okay, you haven't had a head coach in here since the start of week 6, so you got the head start of trying to at least identify what you want your coach to be. I don't know exactly what that is still, and we're a couple weeks into the search. I know the season just ended officially a couple days ago, but then you look chronologically at the list of names that they interviewed, and it's Ron Rivera, Mike Vrabel, Rex Ryan. 2 out of 3 are very uninspiring, at least to me, in Rivera and Rex Ryan. And then you get Matt Nagy. So right out the gates, the ones that you've completed are not very inspiring at all. Obviously, then you kind of make a better turn with Aaron Glenn. But then today you got this Loxley head coach from Maryland, which truthfully, I can't be hypocritical if I'm going to say bad things about the Patriots doing what they did with Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich. You have to call a spade, and that's clearly what I think this is they're just trying to get that second minority for the Rooney Rule. And then you have Steve Spagnuolo. So that's the chronological order. Other than Mike Vrabel and Aaron Glenn, I don't see a guy that I want to be the head coach of this team. And if we read the tea leaves, Mike Vrabel is probably gone. That leaves you Aaron Glenn. So it's kind of a meh list of head coaches, but the guys that they haven't interviewed yet, Joe Brady's, I'm not a big fan of Bobby Slowick, Josh McCown, Arthur Smith, Brian Greasy, Brian Flores, mostly offensive guys still. So maybe it does tell us that they do like defensive-minded instead. I know Nagy is there and Loxley, but everybody else is a defensive guy. So that's kind of the history of the Jets, is pick a defensive guy. We don't really get the first-time offensive guy. Neither here nor there for me. I have no dog in the fight, which I want particularly, but I want the Jets to identify what they want before anything else, and I feel like they still haven't done that.
Yeah, and I think there's a possibility we see them add a coach before a GM, which who
Yeah.
knows? That maybe they will, maybe they won't. Yeah, there are some names on Matt Nagy to me is like I liked him as a candidate. I think I wrote an article saying he should have been a target maybe during God, was I writing during bowls? Like a long time ago. And then he gets the Bears job not long after that. Had a little bit of success there early on.
Hmm.
Really incredible. So what I think he went 12 games with Ryan with Mitch Trubisky, which is pretty incredible. But then things did fall apart after that. They did get ugly. But there is the whole, as I say all the time, like I I don't hate the idea of hiring respected guys who failed once and had time to think about what they did. Um, and Nagy fits that mold, but Nagy, look, and talking about being consistent, and I said for years I would not know. I wasn't as hot on the idea of Eric Bieniemy as some people were, because I would say like if you're working for Andy Reid, who's really calling the plays? Well, that's who Matt Nagy works for. So I'm sure the same dynamic is still in place. But again, the difference being Nagy has done it as a coach with the Bears, has been the head guy. But even still, it's hard to look. I mean, how many coaches who worked under Belichick failed? We're talking Super Bowl winning coaches with, the
Hmm.
best offense in the NFL. Well, when you're working for Bill Belichick with Tom Brady running the offense, you're going to look pretty good. And it turns out, oh, you weren't that good. You were just kind of riding the coattails. So uh, uh, Nagy is like intriguing, but there is that part of like how much of it is him. And again, I'm not saying he would be the right choice. I always, like I said, whenever you're doing a search, and this is just a personal preference, I'm always like, okay, who are they bringing in who's done it and has had a chance to learn from mistakes? And to be honest, like just think, this actually just occurred to me as as those words were coming out of my mouth. I think that way because years ago, I remember, I used to do a ton of reading, and so I'd be in the bookstore all the time, and normally it would be like history and stuff like that, some sports stuff, but mostly history and philosophy. But there was a book that always jumped out at me that I almost bought it a few times, but I was like, I do enough sports. I don't need my off time reading to be sports. But it was a book that talked about, it was like sort of and I always remember Belichick was on the cover, and it was like a bunch of pro coaches who were fired first before they succeeded. And there was, I forget who was on. Belichick always jumped out at me,
Hmm.
but it was like a bunch of coaches that I'm like, I think seeing that book so many times, it kind of pounded into my head like, you need to do it once, you need to fail, and you need to go back and revisit and learn from your mistakes. Like with Dan Quinn this year in Washington, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, oh, he's a bum, he's a wash, he's a retread. Don't hire that guy. Now I got people telling me he was the obvious choice. Spielman shouldn't get any credit for that. Everyone knows Dan Quinn was the right guy. Everyone always knows. Everyone
Yeah,
knows
yeah.
a year after the fact.
Yep.
But that's probably where that bias comes from with me. Like seeing that book cover so many times and thinking about the importance of failing, learning, and then succeeding. Could Nagy be that next guy? I don't know. But I look at Aaron Glenn, who I love, and I've said a million times, if it's going to be a defensive guy, let it be Aaron Glenn. But I look at him and think him or any other first-time coach is probably going to have those hiccups and those, what makes him a little bit different that, and I'm not saying this because I think he's going to be the guy or because he's one of my favorite guys. I think the fact that he has stayed in touch all this time with Bill Parcells as a mentor. So as he's been coaching and learning, he's got the ear of a Hall of Fame coach advising him whenever he needs it. So he's probably learning some things at an accelerated rate that most coaches wouldn't. So I would feel more comfortable with Aaron Glenn than most other candidates. But as I've said many times, I want an offensive mind at the head of the table when things start going wrong. And that's
Hmm.
what an offensive coach gives you. When the quarterback is struggling, when the offense is struggling, whether there's a mechanical issue, a processing issue that a head coach might recognize because I saw that when we had this guy and this is what we did to fix it. I
Hmm.
want as many people, not too many. I don't want 10 offensive assistants, but I like the idea of another voice in the room to help the quarterback who's done it before. That's why it should be Monken, who's not even getting a damn interview.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And I was just gonna say, so based off all of that, and then you went with the offensive, retread. Does this list inspire you at all? Because there's 1, 2, 3, for 5 out of the 7 completed interviews are retread hires. They've already been a head coach before, although they are defensive minded, obviously Nagy being the only offensive mind. So does that inspire you at all that they want a potential coach who's done it before? Or do you think they only want a defensive guy who's done it before, or the quote unquote offensive mastermind first time guy?
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like the thing I want is the one thing they're not going after,
Yeah.
right? They're
Which
going
is
after
Monken.
defensive retreads and
Yeah.
offensive first timers. I want an offensive retread.
Yeah.
Um,
So like a Cliff
but
Kingsbury or somebody like that would
yeah,
make you
Kingsbury.
happier. Yeah.
Someone pointed out the other day. I forget who it was. And sometimes it's just excuse making, or not even damage control. Maybe just making the excuse. But Kingsbury said last time that he thinks that being a head coach took him away from what he was good at, which was being a coordinator.
Mm.
I know he has said he wants to be a coach again, but you wonder if he's really, if he's suited for it, or if he's look. Some guys are amazing
Yeah.
coordinators that never make it as a coach, and I'm not saying
And
he'll be one of those guys, but you
and
just don't know. You
Peter
just don't
Schrager
know.
reported that he was also still getting paid as a head coach by the Cardinals. So I think if he took a head coach job, that would end. Whereas if he's an OC, I guess he's getting paid double, which is just kind of crazy. That makes you think that's probably why Nathaniel Hackett didn't get shown the door. They just let him collect
Yeah,
paychecks as an OC and a head coach as the Broncos at the same time. So I don't understand, but I guess that's what they're going for here.
yeah, that's wild. Someone in
Kingsbury,
the chat, Danger Zone says,
sure.
take a chance. Oh, sorry, that wasn't him. That was JoJo Townsell. And what's up? How we doing? The Watermelon and Danger Zone. How we doing, guys? Rod as well down here. Take a chance, Josh McCown. Now, I said weeks ago I love the idea of McCown as an OC.
Sure, yeah.
First time head coach, don't love it. His relationship with Darnold, and as well as things are going in Minnesota, I think if Darnold stays, McCown would feel inclined to stay. But what are your thoughts there? Like I said, McCown, you give me a quarterback who played in 1,000 different systems for 1,000 different coordinators. I want that dude. I want the guy who has seen and done every single thing. And Josh McCown, no, he's not Patrick Mahomes, but he was an adequate, quarterback at times who looked really good. He battled injuries and things like that. I would love McCown as an OC. Wouldn't love him as a head coach. What are your thoughts there on Josh McCown?
Yeah, I think in like a similar light of like Ron Rivera being a potential DC, not a head coach, I would say the same thing for Josh McCown. He's an offensive coordinator that, like, if you wanted to bring him in for a head coaching interview and just say, hey, you're an offensive guy, we want to get your offensive background, sure, but we want to see how you'd handle everything from a head coaching perspective. And then eventually say they hired Brian Flores and they wanted to bring along Josh McCown, then at least you know what he wants from that perspective. But I'm with you. I don't think I want to take the chance on Josh McCown just yet. I believe it was Connor Rogers. Yeah, it was Connor Rogers, not Hughes, that said he'd rather be a couple years early on McCown. I don't know if I share that same sentiment unless I know that we're getting like a nucleus of coaches that is like well-rounded, not more so than like Josh McCown and like a bunch of unknowns. Plus, you also have to have a good quarterback in place or a quarterback plan in place, whether that's Rodgers with a backup or a new guy drafted this year as a rookie. So, like, I don't know. I think you could sell me on OC for Josh McCown in a heartbeat, but head coach, I really want to pump the brakes and see, again, like it's kind of the cliche, what the staff would look like and what his plan for quarterback would be. But also, is this the spot where you want to be a couple years early? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and especially, another thing is bringing in a guy. If you're bringing in McCown, who's only been a quarterback's coach, like, so again, so many of the issues that you have with guys who haven't done it is they haven't worked with other active coaches a great
Mm-hmm.
deal. So convincing people to come in and work with them. Danger Zone Jet says Glenn McCown. I actually said a few weeks ago, my dream scenario would be Monken, head coach, McCown, offensive coordinator. And yes,
That would be
Monken's probably
inspiring.
going to run the offense, but McCown would be a guy who you can trust. Like I said, a guy who has seen and done it all. McCown can learn from him. That would be my ideal thing. Aaron Glenn with McCown as an OC, I wouldn't mind, but too many. I don't want to see them do the thing again of rookie GM, rookie head coach, rookie offensive coordinator. Like, stop letting the Jets be like an on-the-job training website or
Mm-hmm.
on-the-job training football team.
Yes.
It's not. It's not. It's not ideal. Beloved P says if we had Monken, yeah. If the Jets brought, but again, The Bears and Jags are bringing him in. The Jets aren't. And I know you said, Dylan, and a few people have said to me, maybe Monken doesn't want to come in after, not getting the job last time, which I guess it's a possibility, but we don't know, and it's
Sure,
it's
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 small
certainly a
chance
possibility.
probably. Yeah.
But I guess the fact that I felt like when he left here, like all the press was good. It was like Jets loved him.
Mm-hmm.
He finished second to Gase, and the thing that put Gase over the top was Peyton Manning calling Chris Johnson and telling him to hire. Like he
Yeah.
may have been the hire.
Yeah.
So like, hey
Maybe
Tom,
that
like
stings
be
though,
mad at Peyton Manning.
Yeah, of
You know,
course. Of course.
the owner got swayed by a Hall of Fame quarterback calling his telephone and speaking to him personally, and he got all giddy and said, "I'll hire Peyton's guy."
No.
But yeah, I guess for that reason, and the other thing, was Monken's age. Like he's not a young guy. He's not someone who's going to wait 4, 5, 6 years for another opportunity.
Yeah.
But it looks like he'll get one, and I hope he does. He deserves it. He's been successful at every level, whether it's a coordinator in the NFL, a coordinator in college, a head coach in college. Really, head coach in the NFL is the only thing he hasn't done, but he's succeeded at everything else, and all he does is develop quarterbacks.
What are the teams that he has interviewed for? I haven't kept up with his.
I saw his name pop up. I think he's been requested by the Bears and Jags.
Bears and Jags. Okay.
Yeah.
I think both of those would be good fits for him.
He'd have a quarterback in both
he
spots.
has a quarterback in both spots, whether he, wants to develop Caleb or he wants to work with Trevor in his second contract. Yeah, I think that'd be a good landing spots for him. And maybe that is a part of it, maybe the uncertainty at quarterback. I know obviously you could flip it as like, oh, they can pick whichever quarterback they want theoretically, but they kind of can't because they don't have the draft pick. But at the same time, if you wanted a clean slate at quarterback, maybe this is enticing. But having a guy like Caleb or Trevor in place is definitely a reason that I could see him picking the Jets. Not even requesting an interview is kind of weird. Him and Cohen are the two to me that's like, why didn't you even request an interview? So hopefully after Greenberg's GM interview today from the Bucs, they maybe jump on Cohen and try to request an interview. But I feel like those are the two that really were on top of my list and didn't even get a request.
Yeah, the Greenberg thing worries me. Again, maybe it's I'm making something out of nothing, but every time I've read or heard someone speak about him, they just talk about how he's got a salary cap background, like not a scout. I want somebody with a scouting background, not a guy who spent 10 years working the cap and then did a little bit of scouting. But listen, I've said it before, and I'm going to try to remain consistent. We have no idea what these guys have done. The GM candidates behind the scenes, guys like Greenberg, like we can read about what the media tells us he did. We don't know what he did in those rooms. We don't know what he said in meetings. We don't know who he wanted in certain spots.
Yeah.
That's
I think Schrager had the nicest things to say about him, but he even noted that like he has a bias toward Greenberg, and he said that he's a contracts free agency. He used the word wizard in his description.
He's a cap guy.
Loved around the league, not your traditional GM. So like, I'm not quite sure. Maybe you could sell me on a Greenberg if you brought in like a Dimitrov as like a football ops guy and you paired them kind of two together. And I don't know. I think what report it was, I can't remember, but it kind of hinted that the Jets could be looking at a president of football ops. And I thought that we talked about that midseason and thought it was the cool, hot thing to do. And then it kind of faded away. But do you still think there's a chance that they hire potentially two of these GM guys as like an ops guy and a GM?
I don't know. I think
it's the toughest question for me to answer too.
If they did, the cynic in me, in case nobody's noticed, I'm pretty cynical at the moment when it comes to this football team.
No.
I hate them. But
sounded like Joe Beningo. I hate them.
In me, bro, this team.
There it is.
The cynic in me says that would be Woody doing some damage control after being accused of meddling and letting his family make decisions. Like, look, I'm going to bring in another guy who's a buffer or a barrier. Dude, you can bring in 1,000 guys. You're still the owner. You can still tell whoever is below you to do what you want them to do. So I wouldn't think it would be.
You wouldn't see it as a way that they're like, oh, maybe we have been a little too involved and maybe we need to hire more than a head coach and a GM. Maybe we need to hire more football guys so that we don't have to step in as often. You didn't see it like from that perspective? I've seen it both ways. So I'm trying not to ride the fence, but I'm also trying not to be overly positive because I hate getting my soul crushed every year when they let me down.
Yeah. So I would, everything is negative at the moment. So
yeah.
That was my first thought was, okay, this is because the world knows that you're letting your son help you make decisions. So you got to bring in as many football people as possible to give create the illusion that, look, we're not involved. Look at all these football people around here. How could we possibly be involved?
Mhm.
But yeah, one name that came up, of course, in the GM side of it was Rick Spielman, who,
Chris Spielman.
well, yeah, Rick is helping with the search. Chris is
Yeah.
the former Lions linebacker or Vikings linebacker, who's basically, I think he played for both.
I'm not too sure. I know
Yeah,
he
but
played for the Vikings, I think.
he was
I'm
like
pretty
the
sure.
old school throwback, smashed in face,
Yeah.
bloody nose type guy.
Yeah.
And I took a real liking to him after listening to Rick Spielman and Ryan Wilson's podcast for the past year or so. And they had Chris Spielman on during the offseason, and they kind of joked at the beginning, like, hey, slow time of year, brought my brother on. But it was a great interview, great listening to him talk about the process in Detroit, how he got involved there, what he was doing. And again, he's a guy, if you saw him play, there's no question about how much he loves the game.
Mhm.
I if they brought him in as a guy to run the whole thing and oversee everything, I wouldn't mind that because he's been
Like a
in
football ops guy, you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
because that's kind of, I think, closer to what he's been doing in Detroit because he's not the GM.
No.
He just kind of, I think it was just a matter of like talking to ownership and them saying, we like a lot of what you have to say. Why don't we create a position for you?
Mhm.
And he's basically been a big part of what they've done. So seeing his name emerge, I liked. And it would be, he'd be somebody that I'd be excited about because they have done a lot of great things there in Detroit. And he sort of, whereas with some of these candidates, they're working their way up from the bottom. So you wonder how much influence they have. But maybe a guy like Spielman, who's kind of above it, maybe he has more input. Who knows? Who knows? Again, all we can do is guess what these guys are saying, doing, how they're impacting things behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But
They
yeah,
didn't do that
Dimitrov,
interview yet. They just requested him,
right,
correct?
right.
Yeah.
He's been requested.
Yeah.
Be awkward if he didn't, since his brother is the one recommending names.
Yeah, right.
Why don't you interview my brother? He's like, nah, I'm good.
Screw that guy. Yeah,
I'm
right.
not coming to work for that clown.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be an awkward conversation. But
So going through the list of the GM candidates that they have interviewed, and we can get into the ones that they haven't also. We talked about Dimitrov. We've already covered John Robinson a couple weeks ago. He was one of the first. Then you had Jim Nagy, who we also liked, Riddick, who we both agreed were not really in favor of. And I think at that point there was a 6 or 7 day gap of interviews. And then you had the 4 newest ones, which is Alec Hallaby, the Eagles assistant GM, who all intents and purposes looks like a cap guy. I don't know if he is, but he looks like a cap guy.
But did you see all the comments on who he looked
Andrew
like?
Garfield, 100%.
I'm like, who does he look like? And like the
He's
first
Spider-Man.
comment was like, we interviewed Stifler. I was like,
Oh,
that's who he looks
Stifler.
like.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, he looks like Stifler.
100%. So you got Hallaby, who apparently is getting a lot of hype. Mike Bergonzi, the Chiefs assistant GM, who has been like a leading candidate, I guess, since the start of this whole thing. Ray Farmer, the senior personnel executive for the Rams currently, who was a former GM of the Browns. And then Mike Greenberg, who we've also talked about, the Bucks assistant GM. Any of those names of the last 4 specifically that really intrigue you at all?
Those are the 4 they've interviewed, right?
Yeah, those were the final 4, or the latest 4 that we haven't talked about on the show.
What were they again?
Hallaby, Borgonzi, Farmer, and Greenberg.
Hallaby and Borgonzi. Well, and all, Hallaby is more to do with the success the Eagles have had.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many of you know this, but the Jets' last GM worked for the Eagles too, and things did not work out well. Borgonzi, yeah, I think of all the candidates I've read about, he probably had the most impressive resume, history, whatever you want to call it. So again, going based solely off of what others are reporting about him, he would be the top guy there. Have they requested Agnew?
Nope.
I was
head
sure that was
scratcher
gonna
there
happen.
too. Yeah.
Again, maybe after they talk to Aaron Glenn, maybe he says you got to try to get my guy Agnew in here.
Yeah, and that
maybe
happened today. So I know the GM rules are different than coach rules. So like there's going to be a lull in coaching requests and interviews being done, but I think GMs are almost like any day except for game day, they can pretty much schedule an interview. I'm not sure though.
And we talked about this, Dylan. You reminded me earlier. I'd forgotten about how the in-person interviews count toward the Rooney Rule, but the video ones don't.
Yeah,
And
so
I'm like,
Aaron Glenn's did not
why?
count today.
You're still talking to a guy to give him a job.
You would think,
because
right?
he's not physically in the room with you, it doesn't count. Like,
yeah.
That just makes like, did you interview a candidate? Yes. Was he appropriately inconvenienced? Oh no, it was pretty easy. Well, then that doesn't count.
Yeah.
We need to know that dude had to haul a suitcase through a terminal and wait to get on a plane. I mean, it's probably private jet, some of these guys.
Sure.
It's just so weird to me though. Like, we interviewed a guy who we want to hire and he meets your criteria. Yeah, but it was over the computer. So that one doesn't count. It makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, and we talked about
it. If he has not been inconvenienced, it does not count.
Seriously, and we talked about it in our private chat, and I was giving the Patriots a lot of flack, and I should give the Jets more flack. But I do think that this is going to cause a change. There's some kind of revision to the rule. I don't know if they're going to make it harder for candidates. Somebody called into the Jake Asman show and said that they should put like a limit to it or like a date where they can start hiring coaches. And I don't even know if that would help because now you're just doing your interviews and waiting 10 days or however many days till the day becomes official. So right. I feel like you said, there's kind of always going to be somebody that skirts the rule. It's a good faith rule, but like, it just hasn't really, proven that it's going to work. And that now they're incentivizing, minority candidates becoming promoted to head coaching and GM's positions. So they're trying to do all they can. And I just feel like it's kind of a shame that teams like the Patriots do what they did with Pep and Byron, and now the Jets potentially with Loxley. So I think the rule is going to change.
I think it's just, I think it's a naturally occurring thing. I think that,
yeah.
And
you know
what
who
I
you
said,
want, and you just hire the guy that you originally want. And I think the Jets know who they want, whether it's Glenn or maybe it's even Vrabel. Vrabel left the Patriots organization without a deal. The whole thing was, now that they did this, they don't have to let Vrabel leave, and they can offer him and let.
I wonder if because of all the heat, they were like, "Hey, Mike, we gotta let you walk out and do a couple more of these."
Sure, but the only interview they have now is Ben Johnson, and that's done today. So if they only interview 4 people, and then they make a hire, something's a little fishy. Not saying.
You would imagine if they and the thing with Ben Johnson, like I've been saying all along, it's Vrabel 100% to the Pats, but that was because I saw so many reports saying Ben Johnson to the Jags was a done deal. Yeah, like, if I'd known Ben Johnson was in the mix, it's like I could see the Pats at least, as what they're doing, kick the tires on him, bring him in for a conversation. But
I'm almost hoping that goes over well and that Robert Kraft buys into Ben Johnson instead of Mike Vrabel, just because I know Mike Vrabel's proven enough, and I'd rather the chance of us getting him. I'd rather fight with the Raiders over Mike Vrabel than fight with the Patriots over Mike Vrabel, to be honest.
Yeah, I have no idea what his relationship is like with Brady, but
he's got so much sway clearly in what's going on. So it's very weird what's happening out in Vegas.
As far as I just want to say real quick on the Rooney Rule, what we talked about privately in our DMs or whatever. I said to Dylan, and this is what I've always felt about the Rooney Rule, or a deep flaw that I saw in the Rooney Rule when it was first introduced. I can't. It's been like 20 plus years now.
It was 2000.
This is how fast time goes. If you would have asked me how long's the Rooney Rule been around, I'd be like, 7, 8 years.
The year Belichick got hired by
24.
Yeah.
So it's been around 20 some years. When it first was announced, when it first came out, one of my first thoughts was, it might have been my first thought was, okay, well, so how do they work out the exception when it's a proven candidate? Like, to me, it was such a no-brainer. And there may have been someone available. There may have been like a Mike Holmgren. I think somewhere there was like a previous Super Bowl winning head coach. And I'm like, yo, that dude won a Super Bowl. Like, you want that guy. And I thought to myself, they're going to have some type of exemption for coaches with like X amount of years, winning records, Super Bowl, like clear-cut candidates that teams are going to want. And when they didn't, I was like, that's pretty stupid. Like, because now you're going to do a charade where like, okay, this guy got let go. He's 100% our guy. We've even talked to his agent. We're going to do the hire, but we have to bring in 2 guys that the league says we have to bring in just to interview them. And part of me is like, do you just what happens if you intentionally make a joke out of it? Like, interview like 2 interns, and be like, all right, we did our interviews.
Yeah.
But like, how far is the league going to take it? No, like, we're going to start picking who you interview. Well, now we're going to start this. Now we're going to give you the name of guys you can choose from. Like, okay, you've interviewed these 10 guys. You have to pick one of these 4. Like, at what point does the league say, let the owners hire who they want to hire? Um, I don't know that in this day and age, guys just want to win. I don't know how many owners exist who are like, I think that guy could get us a Super Bowl, but he's not the right color. So let's go with this guy who's going to get us to 9-7 every year. And I'm going to pass on the guy who's going to get me a Super Bowl ring. I mean, I'm not in their heads. I can't say nobody thinks that way, but I would be amazed if anybody, even if they didn't want to hire a minority candidate who they thought could get them a Super Bowl, that's what's going to get them like, at the end of the day, it's about the money. Like, winning Super Bowls is what builds your fan base and generates money. Like, at the end of the day, I think all these guys just care about the green, players and owners. They just want that cash. So, I don't know if it's outdated or it's deeply flawed.
Yeah,
because
sure.
that was my point with the Patriots. Vrabel is a legacy guy with a proven record. Like, they 1,000,000% would hire that guy. So in order to get that happen, they're just going to be like, listen, let's get and the other angle. And I'm not saying the Patriots did this, but I was trying to think like, how could this be looked at in a charitable way? Like, could this be the Patriots saying, here are two coaches in Hamilton and Byron Leftwich who we really like, and we know we're not going to hire them, but they're out of the league right now. So let's get their names out there to get people thinking about them, and maybe they get calls for other interviews. And again, I'm not saying that happened.
I don't think they will.
I have no idea, but the idea that you have a overqualified candidate really when you compare him to the rest of the guys, and then you want to bring in your legacy guy, but you can't. And then you're getting killed because I've seen people killed and I'm like, they're literally getting killed for complying with a rule. Like, that's what they did. They said, we want to hire this guy, and the league said, well, if you want to, you have to do this thing first. Okay, fine, we'll do this thing. And then people go, oh my God, they did that thing. Right? I don't know. I think
by the book they did it right, but I guess when you're comparing the two teams specifically, because we're talking about the Jets, but also the Patriots. Patriots haven't done a coaching search since I was basically, coming out of diapers. I was like 5 years old when they last did their coaching search. So you're telling me they're going to interview 4 guys, they're not getting looks. I'm sorry. No. Pep and Byron aren't getting looks at OC, QB coach, pass game coordinator. None of it.
Leftwich hasn't been out of the league
2022.
That long, right?
Both of them. 2022.
Okay.
He was last.
I know Leftwich a little bit more than I know Pep.
There's no way that they're doing that. Now, if you flip to the Jets, since that rule has been put in place in 2000, how many minority coaches have the Jets hired?
I don't think anyone's had more than the Jets have.
And to a fault, and I'm not saying it's because they were black, but they were kept longer than most coaches get. The Jets do that. They keep coaches longer than they should. So
I feel like Mangini was the only guy who was let go. You could almost say prematurely, but at an appropriate
was probably
time.
The only one too, because he got 2 years. Idzik, but Idzik was Gase and Idzik were the ones.
Thanks, Corn Ferry.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, they're two completely different looks, and I feel like that's why I'm judging them completely differently. Like, Woody's been called a racist before. It's clearly not true. It's clearly not true, and Robert Kraft is not, the straightest walking person in the world either. Like, he toes the line a lot. So it's just two completely different looks for me. The Jets are conducting a search. I don't agree with the Loxley one, sure, but I will push back on Ron Rivera because I do think he is a DC candidate if they hired a Josh McCown. Josh McCown and Ron Rivera, sign me up. You have somebody who has 13 years, bad experience as a head coach record-wise, but he took 4 different teams to top 5 status as a defensive coordinator or head coach. You have tons of experience for Josh to lean on if he were to be the hire. So I don't think Ron was just to satiate the rule. Loxley, I do. I truly do. And I never heard of the guy before, and he is a terrible Maryland coach. 30 games, 25 games under 500 as a coach. I don't think that's a legitimate interview. But now they have the rule satiated. I don't agree with how they got there, but they didn't do it like the Patriots. And I just feel like it's two completely different things. But like Yer says in the comments, it's tasteless. It is. I really don't agree with it.
But you know what? It's like most it becomes political. And most things today are so political. I've seen black people and white people who love and hate the rule.
Yeah, like it was put in as a good reason, and now there's flaws to it. But that's a lot of things. People put in laws into this country that they have good intentions in front of, and now all of a sudden they're exploited. And look at the NIL and the college football. That was supposed to be, okay, you go into your local mom and pop burger
Yep.
shop and you sign autographs and you make $500. Now you got Lamborghini drivers at the age of 19, and it's like, where did we got to this such extreme? So yes, I feel like eventually it was bound to happen, but I still don't agree with that being okay. And I do think if the Patriots hire Mike Vrabel tomorrow morning, which seems to be the expectation, something's got to be looked into, at least investigated, whether they don't come up with anything or not. That's because Pep isn't, that's not a pass game coordinator. Neither is Byron Leftwich.
Yeah, but as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Sure.
No one ever considers the bad ramifications. Like what are the bad things that can happen from this thing we're doing?
Rod real quick says about McCown, he's a QB coach, and QB coach is what we're missing. Yeah, that's
a lateral move though.
Sure, but he's saying like probably hiring him as a OC or head coach or promoting him. But that wanted to bring me, and I follow Kurt Benkert on his YouTube channel. He does a lot of football content. He talked about Greg Knapp and how he was the most important person in his first 3 years in the NFL. I posted the clip on my Twitter account, and it made me just think, like, Zach failed, of course. And like the Jets, I mean, didn't do great in helping him, although they put the pieces around him for the most part. But if Knapp was able to just do a little bit to Zach, like he was able to do it, Kurt was able to have like a 5-7 year career as a backup or whatever. But like Zach could have maybe shown some things. So it's just upsetting that the QB coach position went awry the very first thing, and we never replaced it. But I agree with Rod here. QB coach has always been missing. And that's why I kind of like the Greasy request to interview, because like you're just getting a guy who works solely with quarterbacks, so he knows what to do. Does he know what to do from an entire macro perspective? Probably not, but it's good to get those perspectives. So I thought that was important to note.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure there will be more names that come out as the interviews roll on. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say before we moved on, because I thought we were gonna move to Senior Bowl soon. What would be your duo right now of the interviewed guys? Do you have a preferred duo of who we've hired or interviewed already?
Be Dimitroff and Glenn.
Yeah. So I'm Dimitroff and Vrabel, but that's because there's still hope. But yes, it would be Dimitroff and Glenn would be my 1B for sure. But then I also like Borgonzi.
I was going to say Dimitroff and Borgonzi were the two in my head, but I feel like it's weird. Like, as I said, I'm still pissed at this team, and I'm predicting 4 or 5 wins next year.
Yeah.
But I still look at it objectively and say, from a talent perspective, they're not as far away as most 4-win teams.
Sure.
And if you get a guy in here who's done it and who can identify the strengths and say, we gotta plug 5 holes, and it doesn't have to be 5 superstars, but I need 1 or 2 playmakers and then 3 Jags who can just fill a role. We'll be a playoff team if the coach isn't a disaster. So that's why I like bringing an experienced guy who's done it and who's not starting from the ground. I mean, you could make the counter argument of, hey, Glenn, bring in the inexperienced guy. He's only got to find 5.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you want to bring in the experienced guy when you're going to start all over and build from the ground up, like anyone who came after John Idzik or Mike McCagnon had to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I get where it's flawed thinking or flawed logic, but I just feel like talent-wise, they're not far away. Like, get someone in here who can get it done in a hurry.
Yeah.
But again, even a first-time GM, if he hits on, say, 3 picks, and again, I don't mean 3 all-pros. I mean, like 1 high-level starter and a couple of solid starters and 1 or 2 guys in free agency, and the coach isn't a complete moron, maybe you're not a complete disaster next year.
Borgonzi makes me a little nervous because I think he might bring like Matt Nagy with him, and that doesn't really inspire me. But I've said a couple times now that I think regardless of who's hired, if you give them the first 40 games, I think you will at least know what they are as GM and head coach. It might not be, okay, let's go extend him or we have to fire him right away. But I do think you'll have a lot of clarity in that first 40 games because it's only 2.5 seasons. And I really think that with the roster in place, like you said, the talent, the amount of holes in the boat that we have to fill versus the amount of water throwers that we have, we're not too far away. I think the opening line for Jets wins next year will probably be about 6.5, depending on the quarterback position. I think Aaron Rodgers would bump them up to about 7.5. But yeah, they're not far away. I don't think they're going to be a top 5 pick next year, or whatever the slogan's going to be for Arch Manning or whatever quarterback goes back to school, and all in for all or something like that. I don't think that's going to be the Jets.
Arch would never come to the Jets. Just like Eli wouldn't go to the Giants, Arch would go back to school, hold out, whatever. He
Hold
wouldn't.
on. You might. You
They
never
got
know.
NIL. They're
We
going to
might
start
see it
having
this year with
holdouts soon.
Shador. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, let's move on to the Senior Bowl, which you just mentioned, because it's in a few weeks now. I will not be coming because the flights are several thousands of dollars. So no, that's a no for me this year. Thank you very
And
much,
for those
inflation.
reasons, Glenn's out.
Yeah, that's that's
That's a steep one.
it is what it is. Yeah, it is what it is. So invites are going out, they're being accepted. The list is growing. I really feel like, Jim Nagy might have a heart attack if you told him this, but I think they need to make it like 2 games or 2 weeks or something.
4
A
teams
week and a
worth.
game and a week and a game.
Yeah.
When you're talking, we're going to play one football game and we're going to have 150 guys there to do it. It's like maybe you do 2 games and 75 and 75. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but
It makes
again,
me think like.
the
Sorry.
media would hate it. They'd have to go to Mobile for 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
they would hate that. And I get it, but I feel like, there will be guys there who don't play or who play
Right. I
one or
was
two snaps.
just gonna say, I wonder how much of it is hedging their bets on players like Dewan Jones, who went in on the first day and killed it,
Yeah.
and flared up his knee, which potentially could not have happened, and then didn't play
Right.
the rest of the week and didn't play in the game. So there's chances, and then they have guys come in during the week, and maybe they just want to avoid that. But I agree, like when you get to the game portion of it, 13 snaps is not enough to evaluate the player. So it's like
Right.
all practice, and like the
I was
groups
going to
are
say
getting
that's where
big.
those practice reps.
I think Dom C said 8 was the number of tight ends that they like have historically had. I guess the last couple seasons since he and I have been going there, they have 10 already on the list. So like, where are we going to start trimming this list down to? It's like very weird how they keep expanding, but it just goes to show the type of product that Jim Nagy's putting on is growing like exponentially. Since I first went in 2002, this will be my 4th year there. Like the sidelines have just gotten packed with people of all levels of media credentials. So it's a great thing, but it's also like, okay, the bubble's got to burst at some point, and when does this become too big for everything? Because now you got juniors and seniors because of the weird eligibility. So there's so much that goes into it, but it's the best are going to Mobile, and that's basically what it comes down to. And I'm so happy for it.
Yeah. So let's run through some names here.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a few more games this week. I'm in full on, dig deep on as many players as possible mode.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough because you do get guys that play at small schools, and there's no all 22s, and you find one game that was on ESPN that was done with 2 cameras, and you get no end zone view, and it's like, what am I doing here? I'm looking at a guy, see one side of his body, I have no idea where his other hand is. So those get tough, but we do what we can. So I'll just go over a few of the guys that I've either guys that I like or guys that have jumped out or guys who, like the first guy we'll start with, somebody who's getting a lot of love and attention that I don't agree with. And we've talked about this. That's Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of Alabama. I've seen way too many turnovers. I've seen some amazing and some fantastic deep ball throws. You watch him and you think, is that all this guy works on? Because he's fantastic at it. Like so many good deep balls down the field, but then a little bit shakier on the shorter intermediate stuff and the turnovers. I think he's a multi-year project. I think he's very far from a year one starter. If the Jets are taking a quarterback, look, they're not going to get one of the top 2 guys. So really, if they get anyone, there aren't a lot of guys behind the top 2 that you can look at and say, oh, that guy's ready to start day one. But Milroe to me is a little ways from that. There's another quarterback I'll mention in a minute who kind of is another multi, or who's a project who I think might be ready a little sooner. But any thoughts on Milroe, Dylan?
Yeah, I'm actually really happy that you started there because I've been trying to put together a little slideshow presentation to try to make a cool little YouTube video for Jalen Milroe, because I do think that the Senior Bowl is probably the best thing for him other than what everybody thought he was going to do after that Michigan game, and that's go back to Alabama. I do think there's a lot to like about him, but like you said, I do think there's probably a 20-game developmental. I got to sit him down with a clipboard behind a really good quarterback and a really good offensive scheme and really have him, dig into the roots of, coverages and reading defenses. When it comes to the traits, though, hell yeah, man. Like, sign me up. That's the first round stuff that pops off the page. The deep ball, the mobility, the escapability, the fun like pocket stuff, and like he has good arm strength, not necessarily arm talent. And the one thing I do think is like a big con for him is the decision making and anticipatory throws. I think is probably the other thing for him that I want to just see more. Not necessarily, I never want to say because he didn't do it, he can't do it, but I didn't see enough of it at Alabama in the 3 games that I watched of the all 22 to say, okay, I think at an NFL level, he can anticipate. And that comes with reading defenses and coverages and stuff. So I'm glad you mentioned him. I think this week will be really huge for him in Mobile. Could bump him right back up into the round 1 conversation. Bo Nix went to the 12th overall pick. I'm not saying he was, a UDFA coming into the week, but he raised his stock very high. And then Spencer Rattler was, the next pick after him. It was at 150, but those guys got a boost from going to Mobile. So I think Milroe can benefit from this. And I hope that if he does play and the whole week, he does well.
All right. And the position you mentioned earlier that I've said a few times, the Jets need to draft 2 of them. Milroe's teammate, CJ Dupree, the tight end, big kid from what I've seen, adequate blocker, good enough hands. I think he's sort of a mid-round guy who I don't know if he's going to be a huge contributor in year 1, but I do think he can be a role player in year 1 and develop into a solid starting tight end. Have you watched him? You got any thoughts on him?
I actually not wrote him up, but I wrote him in a notes that I took probably last year when I started doing spring game reviews, and I would go too deep on the depth chart so that I got some of the, the current guys that are going to go into the draft, but then also some names to watch for the future. And Dupree was one of those guys. And he's just one of the 3-4 names right off the top of my head, or looking at the list that I love from this tight end crop going to Mobile. So it's a really, it's a good year to need a tight end, in my opinion. Not in the free agency market. I think you could probably keep Conklin. And then you add a Dupree or a Fannin or a Helm or Elijah Arroyo from Miami. If you add one of these guys, yeah, I think that's a good, well-rounded tight end room for your potentially young quarterback to have.
Yeah, Beloved P says, are there any tight ends worth taking at 7? I don't know about 7. But if you were going to take one, there's 2 guys that I would consider there. Of course, you got Tyler Warren out of Penn State and Colston Loveland in Michigan, who I think would have had a much bigger year with better quarterback play. In fact, I remember earlier in the year, Rick Spiel on their show talking Loveland up as tight end 1. Now, I think Warren's probably past him, but they're both really good players. I don't know if they're going to be like rookie all pros. I don't know how many tight ends have ever done that.
It's funny though, because a lot of people are rating Warren just as higher than Brock Bowers. And I'm like, he was generational last year. How could we say that he was generational, but then put Tyler Warren higher? It's just very confusing.
We do it all the time. We have generational quarterbacks every 2 years.
Yeah. And then somebody rates the guy higher the next year. So it's very funny how that all works out. But yeah, I don't know about 7. Trade down. Maybe you get Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
Fannin in the high
I'm like 11, 12.
Yeah, I would probably like a Mekabuka more than I would like a tight end in that range. But again, if the board falls in your way and you really loved Bowers and you want to overcorrect, then 100%.
Yeah, I think Harold Fannin was actually the first prospect we mentioned this year a few weeks ago when
he
we
was
thought we were going to talk
tight
more.
end of the week. Yeah,
exactly. Harold Fannin, and he went on to he just got better and better as the year went on. Set the all-time college record. For was it receptions and yards or receptions for a tight end? He went off. And listen, it's Bowling Green, it's small time competition, but he had some big games against. He lit up Texas A&M. He killed them. So he can play. He's shown he can play against top competition, and he'll be a sort of. I think he could sneak into the bottom of round 1, but if he's there in round 2, I every time I run a mock and he's there in the second round, I take him.
I got one for you, and we talked about him on the pre-show. This is somebody who I'm hoping the Jets can turn the fortunes of their 2nd, 3rd round, 4th picks and make them into potential starters or at least high quality end backups. That's Jonas Savania, the tackle from Arizona.
Yeah,
I haven't watched him, but I've started to dig in on Tet McMillan, so I will go back and watch the tackle after that. But do you have any thoughts on him? I know you said you've done pretty extensive work on Tet at least.
Yeah, Ted McMillan he was my wide receiver 1 coming into this year.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 years ago now that I sent you a clip of him. I forget who I was I was watching Jacob Cowing a couple years ago. And Ted McMillan was making these unbelievable catches. And I was like, And they had another guy who's moved on who hasn't done as well as they had Ted McMillan, Jacob Cowing, and Dorian Singer, who
Oh,
really
okay, yeah.
Dorian Singer really fell off. But those three at Arizona were phenomenal. And I remember I sent Dylan, I was like, yo, look at this guy McMillan
Yeah,
from
I
Arizona.
do remember that. Yep. That was like
Yeah, it's a
late
couple of years ago now.
2022 or early 2023, it felt like. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was wild.
His combination of like height, length, range, catch radius, however you want to phrase it, the catch radius and the hands, he's got incredible hands, are unmatched. Like I can't think of a guy in the league who's 6'5" with the length he has in terms of his arms and consistently able to make one-handed catches. Like you can't defend him. If you put the ball in the right spot for any receiver, like they always say, like, oh, you can't defend the perfect throw. This guy, you can't defend some imperfect throws. Like there are bad throws his quarterback will make that only he can get to. So he right now, I said the other day, Abdul Carter, I could see taking him at 7, but I don't think he'll be there. I even have a
Not
hard time
now.
seeing Ted McMillan being there.
Yeah.
But if McMillan is there, he's even with Mason Graham on the board, because I feel like I can get someone like Deion Walker in the second round. If I get Ted McMillan, Deion Walker, that combo in round 1, 2, give me that all day. But McMillan's great.
Thoughts on Savania?
Yeah, Savania, the tackle, really, really good in pass pro. I mean, really good in pass and as a run blocker. Massive guy. So, he doesn't move extremely well. He moves well enough, though, and I've seen him get some talk as a first-round pick. I saw, against the bull rush, he held up so well, like just wasn't giving up ground in the couple games I watched. And that was just yesterday. It's the first time I've watched him extensively because obviously I've watched Ted McMillan. I've watched a little bit of Noah Fafita last year, a little bit this year. But this is the first time I really focused on him, and I came away impressed with his power at the point of attack and his ability to just, be a brick wall. Again, in the run game, a guy that size isn't going to move extremely well, but I've seen talk of him as a first-round pick, and given the fact that he plays at the level he does as a left tackle, I could see that happening.
Yeah, I think he and another tackle that I'll mention real quick, Wyatt Milam from West Virginia. Those are probably guys that are going to be big risers at the end of the week in Mobile, in my opinion, based on the early, scouting report on these guys. Wyatt Milam, he stalemated Abdul Carter when they played Penn State. It was a clinic that he was putting on, basically. Like, I had to stop the film of Abdul Carter, stop my notes, and create a scouting sheet for Wyatt Milam just to be like, okay, what is he doing on these reps too? So
yeah,
he was absolutely killing it. So I think those two will be high risers. Hopefully, with our high-end second-round pick, we can potentially steal them. But, yeah, I think back end of first round, always those playoff teams, they're always going to want offensive linemen. So it's going to be tough. But I think those are the two for me that I'm watching real close right now.
Yeah, I think my favorite tackle in this group is Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota. He's
Can't
another
find
one.
film on him at the Caddies cut-ups, but I have to just look up Minnesota full games and just watch him because he's going to be special.
He added like 200 games the other day. There should be a couple of his on there.
I don't know about my tier, but your tier, he definitely did.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
I might have to just, deal with it and pay the money to just pay the one tier up and get it because I need it at this point to get some of these guys.
Yeah, Ariante Ursary is phenomenal. I've seen some people say round 3. Listen, what the hell do I know? But I'm guessing top. I would happily say round 1, but he ain't falling past 50. Like mid round 2 is
Ursary, yeah.
But I still say I say round 1, and I've had people send me links. No, look, dude, he's projected round 3. Okay, great. Then project him, and I'll project. I'll be wrong.
Sure.
I
think he's closer to like
I was
high
an idiot
end
last year when I said Bo Nix could be a top 10 pick. And granted he went 11, but look, we're all just guessing here. Sometimes we guess right, sometimes we guess wrong.
I think Ursary is closer to a first round pick than he is a third round pick. Like he'd probably be closer to top 40, top 50 than he would be like 60s, 70s. So that's not a hot take, I don't think.
No, I think that's completely reasonable and rational. Do we even need to talk about Cam Skattebo? Does anyone not know about him by now? I mean,
the world must know about Cam Skattebo at this point.
It's funny. I watched him last year, and I think I remembered him more for the name than the play. And that's not that he was. I saw so little of him. Because for whatever reason, last year there was like no Arizona State stuff online. I found like one game. But Skattebo, that dude is he's just a ping pong ball. He's that guy that proves like you don't always have to run a 4-4 to be a great back, and he certainly won't run a 4-4. Where he goes, is he a round 3 guy? I mean, he's not going to round 1.
Mm-mm.
But he's just, he's one of those guys that they're really tough to bring down, and those guys are always fun to watch.
My buddy said that he's everything that Carson Steele was supposed to be. And I think that's a very apt description because Carson Steele got a lot of buzz and a lot of hype, especially when he landed with Kansas City. But I could see Scatterboo being like hit the ground running version of Carson Steele. So that would be cool. Defensive guys. We talked about a lot of offense. Do you have any defensive guys that you want to highlight?
Well, the guy that I mentioned a little while ago, Deion Walker, the
Yep.
DT out of Kentucky. I said earlier, T-Mac was my favorite offensive player coming into this year. Deion Walker was my favorite defensive player, and I don't think he was. I've only watched one or two of his games this year. He didn't look as good as he did last year. I don't know if it's system. I don't know. I don't know the reason behind it. But if coaches check him out and there's no work ethic concerns, this dude, and I tweeted it out a year or two ago, he's like 340, 350, and they're lining him up at times, not consistently, but you're seeing him at times lining up outside, like on the outside shoulder of the tackle on a 3-4 and winning and, pressuring the quarterback, hitting the quarterback. Shows maybe the best spin move I've seen on a guy who weighs 350 before. And there were a few plays, sometimes a guy does something, he only does that a couple times, but it jumps out so much that you like, oh, he can do that. Several times, probably at least 3 times. The play was behind it, like literally all the action was behind him, and he knew. He like turned around and grabbed the ball carrier, and it's like he was getting spun around.
Yeah,
the play's developing, and the ability to find the ball carrier when the action is nowhere near his line of sight. So Deion Walker, I saw him, PFN, they've had him all over the map this year. I think currently he's like their 43rd ranked player. He was a guy, again, before the season started, I thought he'd be a round 1 guy. Now that, his production dipped a little this year, maybe he's not a round 1 guy, but he's another one. He's got to be top 50. Deion Walker, the DT.
I would agree.
Out of Kentucky. Let's see what other defensive guys I have.
I got to edge real quick.
Go ahead.
Kyle Kennard, South Carolina. I can't go without talking about the South Carolina guys. Nagurski Award winner, 11.5 sacks this year. 5th-year guy, transferred from Georgia Tech the year before. Jumped up from 6 sacks last year to 11.5 this year. I mean, when I was watching, what's his name, Eman Wari, the safety for South Carolina, this guy just kept jumping out to me. And I'm like, okay, well, this guy keeps being disruptive, and Eman Wari can't even make the play because Kennard is already making the play in the backfield. So definitely those are the 2 guys that caught my eye from South Carolina, and I'm excited to see him because I think edge and, like you mentioned, interior defensive line are definitely needs for this team.
Yeah, one edge guy to keep an eye on while you're down there, Dylan, is Colin Oliver. I've been watching him for a couple of years
Oklahoma
now.
State.
Oklahoma State kid. I thought he was going to transfer, but he didn't. He's been at Oklahoma State the whole time. He's one of those guys where he's been doing it now for several years. It's and like I said, I've said before, sometimes you just happen to catch a guy's best moments and he leaves an impression. But I feel like I've watched 8, 9, 10 Oklahoma State games by now of him, and he's consistently making plays. Even if it's a game, even one of his worst games, he'll have a couple of pressures, maybe hit the quarterback a couple times while he's throwing. But he gets to the quarterback, he disrupts the quarterback. He's been doing it consistently for several years now. Not a name I hear a lot of. I don't have the measurements in front of me. He may be a little undersized. I haven't looked at those in a little while. But Colin Oliver, in terms of D-line or, an edge guy, is somebody I would keep an eye on. And let's see, I think I had one or two more.
It says right here they have him listed as 6'2", 240. So that's okay. Good size.
Yeah, that's like I said, every time I watch him, I'm like, why isn't he getting more press? Why isn't anyone talking about this guy? And like I said, I could be wrong. We've all had players in the past that we loved, and they never made it anywhere near the league or never made it near an active roster. Yep. Maybe that's where I'll be with this guy, but I watch him and he really jumps out. Another DT, Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech, not a huge guy. He's an interior guy, but he's like 275, 280. Really explosive off the ball. Like consistently, when I watched Virginia Tech, he was the first guy off the ball. Saw him get a lot of penetration, getting into the backfield quite a bit. He's sort of I think he's right now projected as sort of a 4th, 5th rounder. But the Jets need help at DT. I talk about taking 2 tight ends. I wouldn't mind taking a tackle. If you end up with Graham Barton in round 1, I wouldn't mind taking another tackle with your last pick.
Sure.
Somebody like Yaya Black from Iowa, who's another guy who's going to be at the Senior Bowl.
Okay. Yep.
They have a guy, Aaron Graves. I don't think he's going to declare, but I like him more than I like Yaya.
From
he's
Iowa?
Yeah, from Iowa. They play next to each other, and he's again one of those guys, like every game. I'm waiting for a bad rep. I'm waiting for, even when he doesn't make a play, he's not getting pushed around. Even his bad reps are solid reps.
Right.
And his good ones are fantastic. He was really good against Ohio State this year. But Graves, I haven't seen him declare, so he's I guess not coming out. But someone like Black, who, if he's there, I don't know if he'll be there in round 7. I think he goes earlier than that. But I would look at some guy. I would look at a DT early and late. And I would look for 2 tight ends in, anywhere between rounds sort of 2 and 5. Lacey, I don't think he's at the Senior Bowl, the Iowa kid. So I know we're talking about Iowa guys, so I'll leave him off the list for now.
Okay.
He'll come up though at some point during our pre-draft talks.
So secondary guys, safety is where my brain went immediately, because I think corner we're a little better off. Safety, we're pretty much bare cupboards going into 2025. I like Malachi Moore from Alabama. I think he's like the obvious name that people are going to be watching. But I also like Andrew Makuba Sr., who you're watching right now on television most likely. As Ohio State scores a 75-yard touchdown reception to Travion Henderson to retake the lead right before halftime, 13-7. I'm surprised Henderson's still in this game. He punched a defensive lineman earlier. So
I thought you were going to say you're surprised he's still in college, because I feel like he's been there forever.
That's true too. No, he punched a defensive lineman earlier, but Makuba Sr., I think he's pretty explosive. He's a big thumper, and Malachi Moore, I think, is more of like your coverage guy that I've seen more back end, playmaking highlights more so than Makuba. But those are the 2 guys that I have my eye on, probably more of the high end guys of this list. But Xavier Watts from Notre Dame is another one who I think is generating a lot more buzz too.
Yeah, Malik Verdon from Iowa State, I've only watched once or twice. I was impressed with what I saw, but too early to speak on him. And Sebastian Castro, another Iowa kid, I watched him like week 1 or 2. I gotta refresh my memory and go back and see him again. But yeah, Watts, I think, is one of the top guys right now, as is Mukaba. I was actually just going to say he's probably playing right now. I explained to Dylan before the show, being in the UK, I only get college games on YouTube, and YouTube has done a phenomenal job of blocking the college football playoff. So I've seen about 80 seconds of college football playoff this season, which sucks.
Yeah, that really sucks, because a lot of these guys I feel like are elevating their draft stock even more playing in the postseason, and I think that's such a huge jump. And also maybe
I don't like guys sitting out. These are playoff games. Like
they're sitting out playoff games. There's guys sitting out.
Some guys are.
Oh, really? I hadn't seen that.
I thought that in the first round, wasn't Michigan in the first round?
Yeah, they beat. No. Michigan played Alabama. They didn't have. They had a bowl game.
Okay, I don't know why I was thinking they were in the CFP.
Mm-hmm.
See what happens when you can't watch any of the damn games.
I think also though, going back to like just the sheer number of Senior Bowl invites, a lot of these guys were college football teams. And they didn't know, okay, maybe based on how long, like this is the semifinals, they still have one more week and then a game to play next week for the national championship. Now you're talking about a 13-day turnaround to the Senior Bowl. Maybe the guys that make it to the
I was thinking about that because
like,
I was making the list last night. I went to the Senior Bowl website and then I created a spreadsheet, put all the play, and as I'm putting these guys that are still in the college playoff, I'm like, hang on a second, like these guys are gonna have like a week off,
right? Like Xavier Watts. Are we even sure we're gonna
be
see
tired,
him?
sore?
Right. So I think that's part of it, is they're going to hedge their bets. Hopefully those guys still go down to Mobile and at least like do the interview stuff and maybe not the practicing and that stuff, but they go do the interviews and stuff. So I think they could still raise their stock, but I think that also has to go with the sheer number of invites and acceptees. Do you have anything else before we get on out of here? I do have a chat that I want to put up real quick.
Just quick question. He's not going to the Senior Bowl as far as I know right now. Have you watched JJ Pagui, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss?
No.
They use him like once or twice a game, and I watched yesterday. I think it was Notre Dame. I forget who I watched them against yesterday. It wasn't Notre Dame. But they use him they direct snap him the ball out of the quarterback spot and let him run it in short yardage situations. He had one game where he had 6 carries for 19 yards. Like, that's how athletic this guy. He's 325 pounds.
Jeez.
I was watching him earlier in the year because his teammate Walter Nolan, very good player. They both team up to make a very good run-stopping duo, so that's why I was watching them because the Jets need some of those.
Mhm.
So I was watching Puggy and Nolan, and I saw them give him the ball. I was like, oh, that's the DT. They just let him run the ball. And then I look at his game logs. He's got like 1, 2, 3 carries a game, and then he had 6 against forgetting who it was yesterday. But that dude's athletic, man. I'm trying to think if I have that clip here. But go ahead and say what you were saying. I'll see if I can find.
Yeah, I just wanted to put up the clip from Sharon here. She says, Agnew GM, Glenn head coach, McCown OC, Sorensen DC. So, yeah, I would agree with this. Unfortunately, they didn't request Agnew, so that's probably not going to happen. Glenn, I could see being the head coach. Aaron Glenn, not Glenn to my left here.
This is going to be so confusing if they hire him.
I've already seen I can't do this with Mike Greenberg. I don't know if we could do this with Glenn on the show.
I'm on the forum that Jet Nation is like a thread title. Like, I think Glenn would be great. I'm like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, I
like,
think we got to change Glenn's name if that's the case. McCown OC, I also would love. We've talked about that. But then Sorensen DC, they've already said that they want to keep him on staff in San Francisco. Not saying they will or won't, but they haven't technically fired him outright. They just want to like demote him and hire a new DC. But I like the thought process. I do like McCown and Glenn as the coach combination, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I do like Agnew. Like we said, I asked earlier if they'd. For some reason I thought I saw his name early on as requested, but I guess not. And yeah, I mean, you do like the idea of bringing in 2 guys from the same building where they're having success, and maybe they have some, already have a good rapport and working relationship, and you kind of get past some of that early relationship building with those 2 guys. McCown as OC. I love McCown as an OC if he's coming with an offensive coach. And that's not to say he can't succeed if it's not an offensive coach, like I said, but somebody like Monken. But really, yeah, again, McCown is different because not many guys have played in as many environments as he has, so he's kind of unique in that sense.
That's true.
The other guy that comes to mind who's like that is Josh Johnson, right? But he's still in the league, or at least he was a couple months ago.
Yeah, he is. Yeah,
like I look at him and I'm like, that guy needs to be a coach when he retires. Like he needs to be at minimum, like get him to be an offensive coordinator somewhere. And McCown is like the already retired version of what Josh Johnson might even have more teams and more offenses than McCown has had.
Yeah,
now McCown got more experience, but Johnson he showed at times that he could play a little bit. So that guy as a coach, sign me up.
Yeah,
like not this year. He's still playing, but
absolutely. I know
in the future. Steve McClendon, man. For years when that dude was with the Jets, I'm like, I want hire this dude as a coach the day he retires. Yeah, and then I see he's coaching in Tampa Bay.
And there's some guys that do that. It's like as soon as they get done playing, they just immediately become an assistant with whatever team.
And he should have been, man. McClendon was.
He was a great leader.
He's like Mr. All-time underrated Jet.
Yes, yeah.
He was such a great he went about his business, the way he produced. Yep. Love that guy. Most underrated Jet. Needs to have more respect put on his name. As
we're ending it on a high note right there with good talks about Steve McClendon. No negativity. You can't talk negativity with Steve McClendon, so that's how you got to end it.
Yeah, well, the best way to end the show on a positive note is don't talk about anyone who's currently on the Jets. But
there it is.
Yeah, so that'll wrap this one up. Me, Dylan, maybe Chris. Hopefully Chris next week. We'll see. He's got a lot of things going on. But as many of us as possible next week, talking more Jets football, a little closer to the Senior Bowl. Maybe I hit the lottery before then, and I end up going. I don't know. But we'll wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans.